Time to go back to the US after Trump's election. Well, today we discuss. Welcome to Continental Insider, the offshore consulting service for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, and related internationals with a boots on the ground approach. For more information, please check out continentalinsider.com. Well, the big news on the end of this year 2024 is the re-election of Donald Trump as the 47th president of the United States. He won on a landslide against the Democrat nominee, the still today Vice President Kamala Harris. And he won on a big fashion. He got 312 electoral college points, and he also won the popular vote after 20 years for a Republican candidate. Not only that, it was a red sweep across the political spectrum. The Republicans are going to control not only the Senate, but also the House. And today, they also control the Supreme Court 6-3. So basically, Trump will have next year, when he takes office, yet again, the White House on January 20, he is going to have every means in order to fulfill all of his political objectives that have been very interesting, to say the least. Today, there are over 10 million US citizens living abroad, mostly in Mexico, but also on the European Union, in Latin America, the rest of Latin America, Southeast Asia, and so on. And the main reasons for this diaspora of US citizens all over the world is the prices, the high prices of everyday goods and services in the United States, but also, of course, the different opportunities that many Americans find abroad, or just personal reasons, finding themselves or engaging in another culture. Also, we have a bunch of digital nomads or investors with passive income that find a better deal regarding cost of living abroad, or just for personal reasons. They want to get involved, get immersed on different cultures and so on. Also taxes, of course, we know the old saying that in taxes, the taxes in the United States are not necessarily the best. Actually, the United States has a very big tax burden, but also you have to consider that the United States is one amongst just a handful of countries that tax their citizens when they move abroad. However, Trump, and on his project, on his government project that he has for his second term, he had included a couple of proposals for actually Americans living abroad. First, he has flirted with the idea of getting rid of the worldwide taxation for US citizens. And that is very interesting. Actually, several people have renounced their American citizenship, their American passports, in order to skip paying taxes. The most famous example is from Eduardo Saverin. He's a Brazilian American, the co-founder of Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg, and he renounced his American citizenship in order to just skip paying taxes. And of course, with a hefty net worth of Mr. Severin, that's a very tempting proposition, but actually thousands of US citizens every year are renouncing their American passports, mostly due to this particular reason. They live abroad and they don't want to pay taxes. Very good on that, very understandable. But actually, Trump wants to end that particular rule. And actually, I think it's good news. I think it's a win-win because if, let's say, you're an American citizen that has a very significant network and you don't want to pay taxes, instead of renouncing, what you can do, I mean, from the US taxman, you can still pay no taxes, but somehow if you have family and you have ties to the United States, still some way or another that will incentivize further investments on the country. Could be just as little as visiting more often the United States, and hence, you're gonna need to pay goods and services when you're around, send some money to the family, maybe invest in real estate meanwhile you live abroad. So, I mean, it's a very good proposition for both sides. I think it's something to consider. Hope that it happens actually through the legislation in the United States. Still too early to call it, to decide, but let's see what happens. The other reason that sounds interesting if you are an American living abroad is that Trump himself promised a very big tax cut regarding the income tax. First, he proposed a tax cut and reduced the income tax to 15%. And that, of course, that will be great. Usually in the United States, depending on the state that you live, but the federal tax is something as low as 20%, something like that. I'm talking very, very low. And it could reach 40%, of course, depends on the bracket. And of course, that will be great. And actually is very profitable for the US government, the revenue of the federal government, because if you apply the tax rule of Arthur Laffer, that is one of my favorite economists. This particular economist, he created what is called the Laffer curve, that basically says that the lower is the tax percentage that you have to pay on income tax, the more revenue it generates for the tax authorities and hence for the federal government. And that happens because taxes at the end of the day is the price for the government services. So if you apply this to a free market capitalist idea, so basically the lower that is your income tax, the more revenue that you're gonna get because you're gonna incentivize more business, more entrepreneurship, and so on. So at the end, the lower the tax threshold, the more federal tax income a country or an institution should have. So very interesting take. And I hope it happens, 15%. Actually, according to Arthur Laffer, when you combine all of the income taxes at the end of the year, 20%, close to 20%, a little bit less than 20% on income tax is where you're going to get the most revenue regarding federal taxes. Very good on that. So only with those two propositions, it sounds very interesting if you are a United States citizen to go back to the old land. And of course, but most importantly, the third reason that if you are thinking about returning to the United States is this particular bullish positive sentiment that is going on right now after the Trump's electoral victory in the United States. He has right now more of a free market libertarian approach to business since, Elon Musk is his particular, top political donor, around 250 million he donated to Trump's campaign, and is basically right now the sidekick of Donald Trump. Also, he proposed this particular government administration called DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. So basically, he wants to make the government more efficient. and reduce the, the expenditure of the government that, of course, comes from the taxpayer. So, very good on that. But basically, that creates a lot of positive sentiment on the US economy, and many big time investors and entrepreneurs and businessmen in the United States are praising Donald Trump right now. Just recently, Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the United States, the founder of Amazon, he said that he's very bullish right now on the US economy. Also, the very important Wall Street investor, Bill Ackerman, that he mentioned that historically he supported the Democrat Party. And right now, in the last election, he endorsed Donald Trump. And of course, we have the endorsement of Joe Rogan. He was very big, and he's like a center left leaning. He has a center left leaning ideology. On the past, he had Joe Rogan. Of course, that is just gossiping right now for the result of the election. So maybe you are watching this, or you are watching what is going on in the United States. You, of course, being a US citizen, and you're saying maybe I should go back and maybe start a business from scratch, or just redo my current business. Could be an online business, or maybe you are a passive income investor, something of that nature, and you want to go back. Of course, maybe you are homesick as well, and you want to go back to Arizona, maybe, I don't know, or Florida, depending on which is your particular state. And you want to go back, maybe take some shots yet again. And if that's your particular case, very good on you. I wish you the best if that's the case. But not necessarily that will be the case. So if it's not broken, why fix it? So for all of these reasons, the income for US nationals living abroad, or the just getting rid or reducing the income tax, federal income tax overall for every citizen, or just because you are bullish on the US economy. For those particular two reasons, are you thinking about going back to the United States? If you ask me what I will do if an American citizen living abroad, well, the answer is, yet again, it depends. If you have a good thing going on abroad, let's say Mexico, beautiful country, of course, with some setbacks of living in Mexico, beautiful country overall, probably the best ROI regarding cost of living that you have anywhere else. And also, if you're living abroad and maybe you have children and they're already accustomed of living in another country, let's say in Asia, let's say in Europe, they already speak the local language, something hard to consider as well, let's be honest. Or maybe you just flat out leave the United States for, let's say, a particular social issue. The United States culture, at least some laws, some social laws, have changed on the past 10 years or so. Maybe you are too conservative for the new culture that we see in the United States. Or maybe you are too progressive and you want a place more progressive than the United States. So the United States is, of course, a very big and complicated country. You have very conservative thresholds, also very progressive liberal thresholds. So that's up to you. I'm not going to judge any sentiment on that regard, either side of the aisle. So regarding these particular cultural and personal issues, that's up to you. Now, regarding financial issues, that's when, I can assist you a little bit more. Yet again, it depends. First, the state. Each state has different laws, different economic dynamics, to put it on that perspective. For instance, if you used to live in San Francisco and you left the United States and you want to go back, well, San Francisco is equally or more expensive compared to just a few years. So you are not doing that on that regard. So you're not going to save anything going back to the United States. Uh, Another reason might be the typical cost of living, the cost of groceries, and so on. I expect actually maybe a disinflationary trend regarding goods and services in the United States if Trump is able to apply those particular reforms, that the particular plan that he wants to implement regarding economics. I expect some disinflation, not necessarily deflation on that regard. So I don't think the United States is going to become more expensive, but still it's going to maintain a very expensive cost of living overall, depending on the state, of course. Regarding taxes, let's see what happens because, of course, he needs to change a bunch of federal laws, and that might take a year. I remember on his first administration, it took him a little bit in order to implement his tax cut, his tax break. Back then, on the first administration, on this second term, maybe it's going to take by the end of 2025 if that happens on the first place. But I think it's going to happen actually, reducing the federal income tax, maybe on the low 20s. Of course, the corporate tax and the personal income tax and payroll taxes. So a bunch to manage over there. We don't know how much is going to be the effective income tax after Trump applies this so-called tax reform. Let's see what's going on. I think it's gonna pass. I don't know how much is gonna be the tax reduction, but I think it's gonna be a tax reduction on the first place. And lastly, regarding social cultural issues, let's say you are very conservative and you want to go back to the United States because you think the US is going to become more conservative. I'm talking on the social level, not on the political level, regarding the new election of Trump. Well, Trump, I think, is going to pass some more conservative laws regarding abortion or also woke progressive hires on federal government, things like that. But on the street level, I don't see something changing. Now, something I have to say is that I see some trend regarding young people, people under 25 in the United States that are becoming more conservative compared to a little bit older generations. Yes, I see that happening on certain thresholds of the US demographics. However, it's not a complete shift, cultural shift that I see. Also, I see a bunch of progressive, left-leaning people. I don't judge them, just, reporting the news here. So at the end of the day, if it's for culture that you migrated out of the United States, I don't see it happening actually. So if you're very extra, ultra conservative, I don't think we're going to go back to the 1950s just because Trump won, but a couple of legislation passed, more conservative compared on what we had on the past 10 years on abortion and also homosexual people rights or cannabis and things like that. And if you are very progressive, liberal, and you are living abroad, I don't think the country is going to change on that regard. I think there are going to be pockets, conservative pockets, liberal pockets, let's say many pockets in the middle. So you have basically a big blend in the United States. Also, a lot of multiculturalism on the big cities like New York, LA, Chicago, places like that. So that's up to you. And at the end of the day, I think in the United States, you can take your pick. You can find every kind of people and every kind of culture. That's actually the beauty that I see on the United States on the first place. Now, lastly, the one thing that worries me about the election of Trump right now is that he's going to go harder on migration, especially on legal migration. By the way, I'm not criticizing that. I'm not judging that. However, here's what happens. when these things go through is that if Trump, the legal migration becomes harder to the United States. And many people, if you're watching this and you are conservative and you don't like migration that much, and by the way, I can understand a lot of bad things regarding migration had happened in the United States on the past few years with the border and Haitians, things like that. Pretty cool. But the issue is if that Trump makes more difficult to the legal process of migration, and contrary as you might think, getting just a tourist visa in order to visit the United States is actually very complicated for several countries and citizens of those countries, like in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and so on, and basically outside of Western Europe. Very cool on that. So what might happen if Trump makes even more difficult getting tourist visas or any kind of visa in order to do a legal migration process in the United States, what could happen is that those countries can also, on reciprocity, make more difficult for American citizens to visit legally those countries on the first place. So you have to be careful on that. So if you are an expat, a nomad, or you live in the United States, you travel a lot, you have to be careful on that. Just, be cautionary on the news regarding legislation or migration laws on other countries. For instance, a very simple example is that recently the UK government just imposed a visa. They eliminated the visa exemption for Colombians visiting the UK. So on a very quick reciprocity move, the Colombian president is considering eliminating tax exemptions for British citizens as well. So you have to be careful on that regard. If you're a traveler, an expat, an international man or woman of the United States, you have to be careful with those particular details. In order to sum it up, if you're a US international, you are moving abroad, you are living abroad, or whatever might be the case, time to go back to the United States, well, that's a very personal decision for your particular interest. If you're thinking on renouncing your passport and you haven't done so, you haven't started the process, I would recommend just wait for a year or two, just in case. And going back to the United States, well, that's up to you regarding personal financial issues and so on. So you have to be careful on that decision. Do it, of course, take an informed decision. But at the end of the day, it depends with a lot of factors. So the most important thing is make an informed decision regarding both, of course, the United States, your home country, but also the country that you right now you are living or visiting, or whatever might be the case. Thank you for watching Continental Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media, and if you want to work with us, continentalinsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.